All right, guys, it's the last video of the weekend going over the final picks for the Cup Series at Dover. Hope everybody had a good Xfinity Series slate. I know Kev did. We've got another Fast Cars, Fast Money takedown. So shout out to Kev for taking down an Xfinity contest and kind of calling the Josh Berry call. Very cool to see. So hopefully we can keep the momentum rolling for the Cup Series. But like I mentioned, I'm going to be at the race tomorrow or today, depending on what time you're watching that. So hopefully, if you see me, wave hi to me. I'm sure I'll probably be wearing some type of Jeff Gordon merchandise. um, but let's talk about this race right here. So I think this is really interesting, especially after looking at practice and qualifying and seeing where all these drivers kind of, shaked out and looking at the grid. There's a lot of chalk and, we'll talk about it here. So let's focus, I guess, at the top range first, Kev. So um, I'll just let you just kind of have an open floor with it, from Larson down to Bowman. Kind of what are your thoughts on these guys up here?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting slate. We got kind of some guys all over the place, even in this like 11, 10K range. You got guys starting the first couple rows, you got guys starting all the way at the back, and then you got Chris Buescher on the pole. It just kind of everything's mixed up a little bit this week, but it's good that, we're this far into the season now. We still got that happening. It's kind of the whole point of this new car. So it's cool to see that. But we'll just get into get into it here. You got Larson and Chase up front, I think. Looking at the practice data, looking at where they qualified, I think these are probably the two guys that are going to be the highest owned this week, and rightfully so. They kind of seem to be the 1-2 punch this week. Yeah, I think those are going to be the two we're going to look at to dominate early and often. Probably, I could see both of them being a dominator at some point in this race. Both of them possibly making the optimal lineup, but they're both well over $11,000 too. So it's going to be hard to maybe get them both in there without kind of forcing your line a certain way. And when you do that, you're going to lose that differentiation from all the other lines. So when you're in those bigger GPPs and stuff, you're going to be more likely to be duped. Maybe less money, you could take it down and only end up with $100. That there's 100 other people that got same line as you. So, but I think they're a good place to go. And then you got Byron here, same equipment, just a little bit cheaper than them. Starts dead last because he hit the wall in practice. So then kind of leads you another path. Do you want to pay 11K for PD? Typically would say no, but he's going to be fast. He's in the same equipment. He had the speed in practice. And, personally, I might, if I'm trying to get Larson and Elliott, instead of paying for that PD for Byron, but I still want a really good driver that offers me, good finishing potential with that PD, and maybe drop down and get Logano. He might be a little bit lower owned than Byron. Offers you not as much PD, but still there. Maybe he can get up there a little bit quicker, maybe grab a couple fast laps and whatnot early. But my favorite play in this whole range here comes in a discount from these other guys. I think he'd be a good one to pair with them. Probably comes in a little bit lower owned just because everyone's attention is going to go elsewhere. It's going to be Ryan Blaney here starting fifth. I think he's probably a pretty similar play to Josh Berry from the Xfinity race. Kind of starts fifth, just outside that first couple rows. So he has that potential to get up there pretty quick. We know he's fast. He's been really fast, really consistent all year. One of the kind of top 3 or 4 drivers this year so far for sure. So, I kind of like that play, maybe coming a little bit lower ownership, might not lead right away. I see kind of Larson or Elliott doing that. But then, maybe stage 2, end of stage 2, he kind of takes over, clocks some laps off there for a while. And I definitely see him getting a top 5 today, but what about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think you covered it really well. And, you look at the first 3 drivers of Larson, Elliott, and Byron. And I think these are going to be the more popular picks and plays, looking at the 6 drivers who are priced in that range. And, the 3 of Logano, Blaney, and Bowman, I think, relatively speaking, are going to come in under owned, compared to Larson, Elliott, and Byron. So I think the latter of the 3 of Logano, Blaney, and Bowman are interesting pivot plays if you aren't playing all 3 of those top drivers together, which if you are, it's going to be really difficult. Or if you're only playing, 1 or 2 of them, I think getting to Logano, Blaney, and Bowman is interesting and a little bit of a different approach to your lineups. And as far as William Byron goes, I think, it's hard not to just roster him in as almost like a free square this week. But you also have to tell yourself, like, everyone is going to be doing that. So I think either go 100% with your ownership on William Byron or go 0%. I don't think you should be somewhere in the middle. If you do fade him, a lot of people are going to be playing him. So your chances of leaping over all those lines are very high. But in the same sense, like, if he doesn't bust, it's very likely that he does hit the optimal lineup. So, you just kind of almost got to flip a coin and, kind of draw a line in the sand and kind of stick your ground a little bit. Larson and Elliott look like basically identical plays. I would say probably only one of them would make the optimal lineup if one of them gets into it. But looking at the front row of Hamlin and Buescher, it's hard not to argue or make the narrative that Larson and or Elliott won't get up there. So a lot of interesting ways you can go, but you can kind of see, the drivers that we're high on up here and then transitioning down into the 9K range. Truex was just someone you can't get to everybody. So Truex was just someone I'm kind of just crossing off. I'm not really going to get to. Like, he has really good track history, but I'm really focusing on practice in qualifying. And just the numbers didn't really stand out to me. It just didn't look like to have, the car this weekend. Hamlin, I kind of out of nowhere put down a really fast qualifying lap. My fear is his car might be a little bit trimmed out. And if he gets caught, back in traffic, I think he's going to drop. And you have Larson, Elliott, and Blaney right behind him. So I think it's hard for him to keep that track position. And then you have Harvick and Busch. I think Harvick and Busch are both interesting plays that I don't think a lot of people are going to get to, just depending on how you're constructing your line. It might, DraftKings might force you another way, or it might restrict you, or not allow you to get back up to this range, depending on what drivers you're slotting in. But I think both of them are really interesting GPP plays. Harvick has been really consistent. He hasn't really necessarily been that lap leader or, really showing that he can win races, but he's been, contending for top 8s, top 5s. And that's kind of what you want to see. And Kyle Busch is she's usually hit or miss. I know Kev was talking earlier, it's crazy to see Kyle Busch almost at $9,000. So, he seems like a really good value play, but curious if you have anything else to add there, Kev, for the 9K range, or if you just want to keep moving on down.
No, I think you nailed it. I think Harvick and Busch are kind of interesting plays this week. You kind of can see them coming in lower round, but I don't necessarily see either one of them winning this race or really doing a lot of lap leading. But I can see them both easily getting a top 10, and you still get that finishing potential, and that's decent points. I mean, top 10 is a good bit of points that come in pretty cheap. So I think if you can end up there, it might differentiate yourself a little bit. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just being one driver different than everybody else. And that's the difference between $20 and $100. So, but we'll move on down here. I think Reddick's really interesting. We kind of mentioned how Byron and Logano are those PD plays up high, but you're paying a lot for him. I kind of like Reddick here. Offers, same thing. It's going to be a PD play. Don't see him leading laps, winning this thing or anything like that, but offers you some PD. Could see him get maybe top 15, top 10. It wasn't like crazy impressive this week, but we know he's been running pretty good so far this year. And, I think it's just a cheap way to get some PD, get off that chalk that's up above it a little bit. But other than that, nothing in this range really excites me. Chastain, I'd say, is a pretty GPP play. Starts 7th. He's obviously just been phenomenal so far this year. It's hard to see him doing much more than that. Maybe move up a spot or two. And I think I'd rather just go another route, or rather just take the PD or Reddick. But, if you're playing multiple lines, I think I'd probably definitely want some exposure on Chastain. Just, you never know what might happen. He's been really, really solid so far this year. But if we move on down here a little bit, I'll just touch on one driver in this next range, and I'll let Andrew go at it. And that's Brad K. I really like Brad K this week. Same thing, start 20, so he gives you some of that PD upside. Haven't really seen too much of him this year, but he's had some decent runs. Seems to always find himself in a little bit of trouble, but his teammate there, Chris Buescher's on the pole. He's starting 20th. You would have to imagine that they share some information, make some adjustment to Brad K's car. And, probably coming lower round because he hasn't been all that hot this year. Comes in really cheap there at 7,700. And then, I don't know. I'm kind of curious in him, interested. I could see him getting a top 10, kind of surprising everybody this week. And I think it's someone to look at. You should be able to get him in there. You're trying to slam in a bunch of those guys up high.
Yeah, he's unfortunately hasn't had the best of luck. And, after having that penalty, come down on him, he's looking at the point standings. Like him, he's pretty much in a must-win scenario. So I like this team to be aggressive, take risks, and sometimes that can really pay off from a DFS standpoint. Sometimes that can really hurt you from a DFS standpoint if you have a guy out there that is willing to take some aggressive risks. But yeah, we haven't really been on him too much this year, but I think this is a week that I think you should look his way, especially, especially when you dive into the practice data a little bit more. It was crazy to see Busher like out of nowhere just lay down that lap. But Keselowski actually did have relatively good speed in practice, and was showing to have kind of a better long run car. So Busher's way cheaper than him. I don't really see the upside of Busher, and we'll get down to that in that range in a second. But I think Keselowski's an interesting play. I think he's a guy who can stay on the lead lap. Maybe fight for a top 12 or something. And, if things get crazy, maybe even get higher than that. So he's interesting. I think he's a similar play to Austin Dillon. I think a lot of people are going to go to Austin Dillon just because Austin Dillon's been having a much better year. He's a little bit cheaper and he starts further back. He's another driver that we're high on. Both RCR cars didn't really show that good of speed or pace in practice, but I feel confident in that team that they'll get it figured out and have a solid run on Sunday. And then the last guy I really want to touch on, he's more of a GPP play, would be Austin Cendrick. He's interesting. He's almost kind of like I don't want to say like the Chandler Smith play of the Xfinity series, but he's a driver who's priced relatively cheap. He's in good equipment. Kind of starts a little bit towards the front of the field, and Chandler Smith unfortunately didn't work out in the Xfinity series, but it is a little bit more of an aggressive play. So he showed good speed in practice, so I think he's someone who can maintain his track position, or potentially fall backwards, finish in the 20th, and then it's not going to be a good play for you. But I don't know how much ownership he's going to carry in it, because I think a lot of people are just going to plug in probably Austin Dillon in this range. So I think he's an interesting pivot. But what about the 6K range down here?
Yeah, I think this is kind of interesting range. You're gonna have to probably get somebody out of this 6K or below range, just the nature of how many expensive drivers that you almost have to have this week, just based off everything we got to go off so far. But I mean, we have it here: Amarola and Eric Jones. Probably the two out of this. They offer some PD. They both been pretty good so far this year. Found themselves in a little bit of bad luck from time to time, but nothing too crazy. So I think they're probably both relatively safe plays that probably not going to, unless they get caught up in something and get knocked out of the race early, they're probably not going to hurt you too much. No reason they shouldn't be able to stay on the lead lap, move up, probably both at least a top, right around maybe a top 20 car, maybe more depending on what happens. But for that price range, it's kind of all you want. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not really going to think too hard about this. If I do find myself in this range, it's just really just going to be between Eric Jones and Eric Almirola. I'm not going to get to Chris Buescher. Maybe if you're building multiple lines and you think he can lead, bulk of stage one and, still have a good finish at the end of the day, plug him in. It's just, I have a hard time imagining, Chris Buescher even finishing inside the top 10. So the upside there, I mean, there's basically none unless he is going out and leading you laps. AJ Allmendinger, I think, isn't really going to carry a ton of ownership. He kind of starts in the middle of the field. I think he should probably finish there. Cole Custer, I think, is someone who will carry ownership. But all the Stewart Haas cars didn't really look that fast. I mean, I know we're high on Almirola. I'm focusing more on Almirola's, I guess, track history than anything else, and the price and, kind of where he starts and, his ability. Harvick showed good speed, but other than that, the Stewart Haas drivers didn't really impress me too much. And then getting down to the punt range, you have kind of, I would say, 4 plays down here that I think are interesting for different reasons. Ryan Preece is in the Rick Ware Racing 15, but we know that, Stewart Haas Racing is playing a much more significant role in this car, especially anytime that Ryan Preece is in it. You could see that with the practice data and the speed and, where he qualified. So he's almost kind of like the, Raja Caruth play of the Xfinity series, which again, it's an aggressive play and it didn't work out. but he's priced that in a similar matter. He starts, towards the front of the field, and he was a driver who showed, good speed in practice and qualifying. So his finishing potential is a lot higher than everybody else's. Don't know if a lot of people are really going to get to him. So I think he's an interesting, really aggressive type of play. But if you're only building one line, or if you're building cash, I think, your go-to pump plays have to be Todd Gill and Harrison Burton. I mean, it's kind of no brainers. A lot of cars had issues in practice. These two were in that list. So that's why they weren't able to post a qualifying time, basically start DFL for the most part. Can't really lose you any points. They're going to carry a lot of ownership. So, if you are looking at the chalk plays, it's going to be Gilliland, Burton, Byron, and then probably a combination of Larson and or Elliott. So if you're looking for some potential pivots, I know we talked about some of them early on, but I think McDowell is another interesting punt pivot option that will probably still carry some ownership. But if you're looking to fade, chalk somewhere, I think McDowell gives you an interesting pivot play. Anything else there, Kev, you want to talk about?
No, just maybe add a little bit more to Todd and Burton there. I mean, Todd's been phenomenal for us all year. He kind of always seems to be top 25, even more. Now he starts 34th. His price hasn't gone up at all. So until he proves us wrong, it's hard to not keep playing him. Seems to be able to get more out of the equipment than is there. And then Burton's just weird to me. He's in that Wood Brothers equipment, and we can get him for $5,000, which is just ridiculous to me. Last year, Matty D was always in that 8K and up, maybe a little bit less depending on the track range. So you're getting the same equipment for $3,000+ cheaper. I know that team's had absolutely horrible luck so far this year, but as consistent as the bad luck's been, it kind of leads you to wonder if it's the driver and not the team as a whole. But that being said, $5,000, great equipment, starts really that far back. It's probably going to have some exposure on him this week, but kind of makes you wonder what the internal conversations there are at Wood Brothers after they made the decision to go with Burton over Matty D. But that's all I got.
Yeah, that's all I got too. And, just wanted to thank everybody again. I mentioned it in the Xfinity picks video, or maybe the preview video, but we finally hit the milestone of 400, YouTube subs. But we also did a little bit of digging kind of into the analytics, and we realized that basically like 70% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed. So if you're in that category, if you're in that percentage of the 70 who enjoys watching these videos week after week, and if we've helped you in any way, like we're not asking for money, we're not asking for anything other than some likes and some comments, and at the end of the day, subscribing to the channel, because our goal is to get to 1,000. So if you're able to, just hit that button for us, it really makes a big difference. But that'll do it. Hopefully we can keep the takedown streak, continuing this weekend. And hopefully it doesn't rain on us tomorrow at Dover, or today, depending on when you're watching this. And if you see me, wave hi, and best of luck, everybody.